Hey, Boy Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report, Thursday edition of the show, late night edition, coming to you here a week from the NBA Finals. And the question everybody's asking is whether Kristaps Porzingis will be ready to go for that game one. Not much out there. Dr. Flynn is joining us here, a longtime friend of the show, a great injury analysis, sports medicine doctor. Welcome in, Jess. Great to talk to you. And of course, it's never for good news with you, right?
I know, I'm like the Grim Reaper.
Right.
It's good to see you.
So it's good to see you. I'm just wondering what's going on here. Obviously, Joe Mazzulla is pulling the Belichick and just keeping his lips completely sealed about any updates, anything he's doing, where he's at in his progression. But what we do know is the soleus strain suffered just over 4 weeks ago. Dealt with some calf stuff during the year, but I believe it was the other calf that he missed some time with during the regular season there. Took some time, came back, after about missing like 4 games or so there. But this has lingered for, going on 5 weeks now. And on the radio, Joe said he's doing a little solo work at this point. Nothing in the shoot-arounds with the team. Obviously, they're not practicing during this stage of the playoffs, but they'll get a chance to this week. So we'll learn pretty soon whether he's able to get it back out there and participate in practice. But 4.5 weeks or so, is there reason for concern here? Is this normal? Like, where should a guy with a soleus strain be at this point?
A soleus strain is a very tough injury for a basketball player, especially a big basketball player. We see issues with the Achilles, and the Achilles is attached to the calf muscles. So it's just really important for these guys to be able to get up there, to be able to rebound, to be able to jump, and to be able to move and kind of be explosive down the court. So tough injury to come back from. I mean, we see it not just in the NBA, we see it in the NFL, right? Joe Burrow had a calf injury forever, was, struggling with it forever. So these take a long time to heal. So I'm not concerned that it's been 4 weeks. In fact, I'm thrilled that he's had the time. And if you look at my text messages from lots of people around the NBA, they all ask, when's he going to be back? And they've been asking me, ever since the injury happened. And I said, we'll see him in the NBA Finals. So I still hold to that. I think we will see him.
Yeah, and that seems to be the hope right now. Of course, there was some hope in reporting that he could be back for that game 4 in Indiana, and at that point, it's 3-0. Maybe a little more cautiousness expressed there. Is that the kind of thing you would like recommend in that spot? Is like more time is going to have him in a better place, healthier, more like himself at that point? Or once you're like 100%, you're just 100% at that point, so he's really not there yet?
Well, it's kind of annoying. This answer, I'm sure, is not what you want, but it's a real finesse decision, right? Like, I can't tell you what I would say in that position because I didn't examine him. I don't know what he's doing right now. It really is. It takes a skilled doctor who's done this a lot, a skilled athletic training team who's done this a lot to really know when the athlete is ready. And they have a great staff. So I'm sure they're making those really important decisions. But yes, like, obviously you want to play it safe, especially with a player as important as he is, just to really make sure he's completely, as healed as you can get him to be, where you're not going to put him in danger by putting him out there. When he injured his calf, a couple of plays before that, he rolled the other ankle. I don't know if you noticed that. So he rolls the other ankle, and then he kind of is up and down the court a couple of times, kind of limping. And then he goes, I think he went to jump up and push off. And the question is, did rolling that ankle maybe kind of set him up for putting too much force on that other leg? Like, was he favoring that side? Well, so you look at that, injury, and then fast forward to now, you don't want to put him in that position to have another injury by letting him go out there before he's, healed enough. It's unreasonable to expect he'd be 100% at this point, but you want just to get him into one of those safer zones where he can be effective and not be at risk for further injury.
Is this something where they would know the grade? Like if you were comparing it to another guy's calf injury, obviously around a similar time frame, there was Giannis's soleus strain, and he ended up missing 4+ weeks there into the postseason. I think he said once Milwaukee's season ended that he was only at like 30 to 40% readiness to be back at that point, and that was 4+ weeks into his recovery. Is it possible that he had a more severe sprain than Porzingis, or is it tough to kind of tell with this kind of injury, like what the grade is, what the time frame's going to be?
Well, I mean, the doctors treating it probably know, right? Because we get MRIs much more freely now, and there's a grading system with MRI where you can see like how many fibers of the muscle are affected, and that gives you an idea of grade. And then that can correlate with a return to play. But so much goes into this, it's also like the way that athlete plays, what their other associated injuries. Did they deal with calf issues earlier in the season? Even if it's the other leg, sometimes that can be even worse. So it really is very specific to the specific player and the situation.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing, yeah, obviously you mentioned the other calf injury he dealt with during the year. You also noticed kind of like a like patch, I guess. I don't really have like the right term for it on his calf at that time
Mhm.
going into that game specifically. I think I remember. So maybe something he was managing a little bit going into that, or is this something that can just kind of like pop up out of the blue, the injury, the way it happened for him?
Both. It can be either, but you're right. He did have, I forget if it was a sleeve or some KT tape or something on that calf before it happened.
Yeah. So what can you expect for a guy? It's a unique situation here, and I think I forget who said it. I think only like Jameer Nelson. I wish I knew who said this to give them credit, but someone said Jameer Nelson was like really the only player who missed most of the postseason, multiple rounds before coming back in the NBA Finals. I don't know what his injury was specifically off the top of my head, but 2009 is really the last time we look back at a player of this like caliber, this importance, missing that much time and then coming back fresh to start the NBA finals and hitting the ground running, playoff intensity, all those different kind of things. What's going to determine, I guess, just how involved, how ready he is, how many minutes he's able to play right off the bat? Like, could there be some sort of limitation here potentially for him coming back from this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would expect they would work him in. I realize it's crunch time, and obviously every game matters. Every minute of every game matters, but like you've got to be reasonable. You can't throw an athlete back in, especially in that specific situation, in the NBA finals, and expect them to be able to play a whole game. So I would definitely expect to see him limited, and they'll see how he responds. If he plays, game one, they'll see how he responds and make a decision about game two, what his minute limitations will be. I'm sure it's something that we'll see them manage in game as well. They'll probably be working on him, keeping those muscles warm, when he's taking some time on the bench.
Yeah, and so one of of course, with the caution here that they've obviously followed um, with how much time he's missed here. One thing that always gets brought up with the calf is the Achilles, like you mentioned off the top of the show there, and it looked that kind of scary moment when it first happened. And, he kind of has the jersey over his head, and you can kind of think like that's probably where his mind went to, just off what he felt in that moment. And obviously, you get the test back pretty quickly there at the arena that that's not the case. But with a calf injury and, coming back from that and trying to get back on the floor, how much risk is there to the Achilles associated with a calf injury like this?
Yeah, well, they're all part of the same complex. So when you're using your Achilles, the thing that's pulling on the Achilles is the soleus. The soleus is the muscle that's pulling on that Achilles rope that's attached to the foot and allows you to kind of push off. So they're obviously very related, significantly related, and you want to make sure that that muscle is acting as normally as possible. So there is increased risk to the Achilles when you have a history of calf injury.
Yeah, and is that something you have to consider with the comeback? Like, if you do come back too soon, there could be the risk for that Achilles or something like that.
I mean, yeah, but there's also risk of other injury. Like I said, he rolled an ankle and maybe that contributed to the soleus strain. So it's not just the Achilles that you worry about. You just worry about an athlete being out there not 100% and not having normal body mechanics, and that leading to an injury of something else.
For sure, a lot of great insight here from Dr. Flynn. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors here at the Garden Report. We, of course, brought to you by Prize Picks. Go over to prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS for 100% deposit match up to $100. Finals coming up. Mavericks up big right now, so it looks like it is going to be Boston, Dallas in these finals. Luka, Tatum, all those guys, go see their projections, pick 2 or more of those guys, and you're off. It's that easy over at PrizePicks. Use the code CLNS for that deposit match. And Game Time, if you want to get in to the arena, it's going to be tough, but Game Time is going to try their best to help you. Go download the app, use code CLNS, and you're going to get a $20 discount on your first purchase over there. Of course, terms apply. Go download the Game Time app today. So, of course, without knowing specifically like what the process he's going through right now, what's common, guy suffers a soleus strain, sits out, I'm sure, for some amount of time. Once you're back on the floor, I know Joe mentioned like he's doing some individual workouts out there. We've seen him just kind of doing some light shooting, not really moving around a ton, not really kind of in, 2-on-2, 3-on-3 drills, at least from what we've seen. And we really haven't seen him over the last 2 or 3 weeks on the floor, which is interesting too here. But what's the process once you're back on the floor after suffering this injury to kind of ramp up and get ready to play again, typically?
Yeah, it's all about the sports specific movement, right? So being able, obviously, to do what a normal basketball player has to do, but specifically for the calf, being able to push off with force and kind of gradually increasing that force and replicating game like scenarios and getting other athletes out there with him where he really, because when you're doing a drill by yourself, you're moving very uniformly, right? But then you get other guys out there and suddenly there are other feet that you can kind of roll an ankle on. There's, other bodies kind of pushing you, and we call it like perturbing you. Like you go up to take a shot and someone hits you. You know what I mean? Like you get bumped, and it's those little movements that you need to kind of get used to before you can get back into gameplay. So it's a matter of gradually increasing the intensity of that, and then also the volume of how much he can be out there.
Yeah, and Joe said today there haven't been any setbacks, which is key too, of course, because the 4 weeks go by and you do start to worry a little bit, especially where you haven't seen him, that there might have been a setback at that point. Not in practice yet, not in those like 2-on-2, 3-on-3 settings. It just feels like some individual work at this point. So, what's kind of like that progression like? Like you mentioned, I guess part of it is just being able to accept contact, maybe not having pain in the calf or anything like that. Like, what would kind of progress you to the point where you can practice, where you can participate in full team stuff?
Yeah, I think when he's out there doing his individual training and he's doing, like I said, enough intensity and volume that they feel like, okay, and he's not having any pain or setbacks, that they feel that he's ready to start practicing with the team. And then he'll be back with the team and sort of gradually being worked back into team play and team drills. And again, live play, like that's the thing he has to be able to do before he can step on a, NBA final court.
Yeah, for sure, especially at that level of play, that intensity. And it is interesting. I keep using the Giannis parallel because they're both 7-footers. They're both guys who play with a lot of burst, who attack the basket off the dribble, who just do a lot of movement out there. These aren't like very stationary big men.
Mm-hmm.
So there probably is that aspect to it too, right? The fact that these are 7-footers, that these are guys who have dealt with injuries in the past. I think with Giannis, it was kind of like the hamstring or something like that he was dealing with before the calf. In Porzingis's case, the ankle injury that you mentioned, and then, some calf stuff throughout the year. So part of this longer layoff here probably has to be the fact that this is just like a bigger guy with an injury history, with some stuff that he's dealt with, throughout the year, right?
Yeah, but it's also calf and basketball. Like those two things you need to be able to push off. That's like the entire game, right? So I think when I see a calf injury in basketball, I worry a little bit more. And it's really interesting. So in general, in my practice, what we see is especially like boys or men, when they're growing, when they're going through growth spurts, you have to remember like your bones have growth plates. They have little spots in them where they expand and the bones get longer. The muscles that are kind of spanning those bones, they don't have a growth plate. They just have to stretch. So think about it like a violin string, right? It's just being pulled as the violin is getting longer and longer. Those strings are just getting pulled. So taller guys, yeah, they have a harder time keeping those muscles loose, and they're at increased risk of having muscle strains. So your point about the 7-footers, yeah, that's, muscle injuries they're just a little bit more common.
So you said, I think you said you're expecting him to be back out there next week. Who knows, right? Like, I think we all are, but you get to this point, you thought it might be these finals at this point, and yeah, I know the 3-0 lead probably has something to do with that at that point. No need to rush him back at that spot, but is there any chance you think this could linger into the finals at all here? Like, would they gain anything from giving him another game or two here potentially? Or like, could he just not be ready 5+ weeks in? Is that a possibility here? Could this be something that just takes a little bit longer?
I'm everything you said is possible, right? So
Yeah.
it's possible he's just not ready yet. We don't know where he is. Like you said, we haven't seen him. But if he is ready, if he is progressing through, that's a really good sign. I personally think we're going to see him. I think a month is a good amount of time. Um, of course, there are always outliers, but I do anticipate that we'll see him. And you asked, would it be helpful to give him maybe another game? Well, it depends on where he is. It depends on where he is in practice a week from now. We don't know that. This is not something that's going to be gone. Okay. This injury is not going to be gone. It's not going to be something he doesn't have to deal with. And it is something he could aggravate the first game he's back. Like, we just don't know. That's what these muscle injuries are like. And that's why they're so frustrating. And that's why sports leagues are putting so much money and research into muscle strains, hamstrings, calves, all that stuff. It's because they're so hard to deal with and they affect so many athletes.
Is that common with this injury, a re-injury, an injury coming back from it, aggravation?
Absolutely. It's really common for them to kind of get a little irritated. Now, we may not see it. Maybe he does go out there and play and we don't know, but he's sore that night. Like, that's absolutely possible. And then the training staff will work with him and get him ready for the next game.
All right. Well, of course, we don't have a ton of information on Porzingis, so it was great to be able to glean some stuff here from Dr. Flynn. Is there anything else you would add here that I wasn't asking? It's always tough to know what you don't know.
No, I think that's it. I mean, I expect to see him back. Like I said, I don't think you'll see him at 100%. That's what I think you should expect. He's going to be back. I think he's going to be back. All right, let me get my crystal ball out. My crystal ball says I do think he'll be back. I don't expect him to be at 100% though.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. Of course, minute restriction certainly possible there. Maybe a different role as well. Just a lot of very secretive with Porzingis so far to this point, which can be frustrating. But I'm glad we were able to get a little more information on it here, on what typically happens with these injuries. So appreciate you, Dr. Flynn. Anything you want to share out there in terms of your work?
Oh no. I mean, right now I'm doing some work with the 33rd team, mostly football. So I'll see you guys in football season.
Of course, a lot more injuries there. Luckily, I mean, the Celtics health-wise, other than this, have been pretty good here so far.
I
I
know.
know
Oh my
Luke had
gosh, not something, because when Tatum went
yeah,
down,
knock on wood, right?
when Tatum went down with that foul and he was grabbing his wrist at the end of the game, it did not make me happy. So let's just hold that. Let's hope that was nothing, and he's feeling great going into game one.
Yep, for sure. NBA Finals a week away. Looks like we're gonna have a Dallas-Boston one at this point. Dallas up big in their game 5. So plenty of preview material coming here on the Garden Report. Thank you, Jess, for stopping by. Great to talk to you again here. And hopefully we won't need to talk to you again the rest of the way.
That sounds great. Enjoy the finals.
All right. So Kristaps, Dr. Flynn thinks he will be back for the finals. Just a less than 100% version of him. So we'll, we'll hold her to it. Not really, but of course, she's not able to observe him, look at the injury, anything like that. So we're just going off what typically is the case in these injuries here. So great information there. Thank you to her for stopping by. I want to give a quick shout out to one more sponsor here, PXG. It is golf season. It's a great time of year to get out there on the course. Use their hats, polos, tees, all the things to make you feel good and comfortable out there on the course. That's going to have you playing good too. You need to feel good and look good to play good. So go get their great gear and get a discount on all their apparel at pxg.com/Garden Report. Save 10% on all apparel when you go to pxg.com/Garden Report. Of course, a quick shout out as well to our sponsors here, Game Time. Go to the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code CLNS and get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And Prize Picks. Shout out to Prize Picks. Use the code CLNS for a deposit match on our official daily fantasy sports partner here. Thanks everybody for stopping by. Celtics practice tomorrow. Will we see Kristaps? Who knows? But we'll be there if he is on the floor at all. We'll have updates. We'll have Garn report tomorrow as well. And a full preview edition of the Mavericks, who look like they're going to be that finals opponent at this point, barring a miracle out there in Minnesota. So, yeah, thanks everybody for stopping by tonight. Enjoy the rest of the game, and we'll talk plenty of Mavericks, Celtics in the coming week here. Appreciate you all.